Hello, welcome back to Chamber of Spoilers. It's Jewish American Heritage Month. Literally the last day. I really pulled it out in the clutch for this one. And the world still appears to be on fire. It's really nice for us. I love that. Me and Sam wanted to finish this really ambitious video that we've been planning for probably like a year. But again, with the time management, we just couldn't pull it out. But instead, we decided to do a little bit of work on a new series that we've wanted to work on forever, that we've both been thinking about for a really long time, that I hope you're all going to really enjoy. As a Jewish person, it's sometimes really difficult to watch mainstream television shows written for a non-Jewish audience when the representation is like especially ludicrous. A lot of TV shows do like a pretty decent job, but for some of us it's just kind of an exercise in frustration, especially for those of us who started watching TV in the 90s. This particular episode is just kind of a sea of pettiness, so if you're not on board for that or you already know why Rachel Berry is bad, you can just disembark now. I'm not going to be offended. It's fine. I understand, like, sometimes we're here for Jewish joy, and sometimes, not so much. There are going to be some really positive episodes that I'm looking forward to writing, but this one is just, it is not that at all. If you are interested in what we're going to say, but you don't want to stick around for the whole thing, I can give you the short version, which is Rachel Berry is a collection of stereotypes, and her character is mostly defined by being ambitious and selfish. She doesn't really grow and change much, and like most of the characters of this show, she has a plot line but no real arc. Her Jewishness is most often used as A, a plot device, B, a gag, or C, a bid for diversity points in a show where the diversity is like super lacking, despite there being a lot of named characters of color in a show that came out in the late 2000s. It's still pretty fucking bad. For the purposes of this, we're going to be focusing mostly on the early seasons, which is the ones people actually watched. I do acknowledge that Rachel may have gotten better later on in the show, but no one would have known, would they? It only counts if people actually watch the show, Ryan Murphy. So, in television and media, Jewish women are often, if not mostly, relegated to being stereotypes. And Rachel actually encompasses several. She's both the Jewish American princess and the nagging Jewish mother. Rachel is supremely entitled. She believes she deserves everything, and she has two doting fathers who reinforce that. The show also weirdly reinforces her egotism at times, which is certainly a narrative choice. And Rachel also initially has no real friends because she's unpleasant and rude, and she has no desires or interests outside of musical theater. She also always has to be the center of attention. But not only is she the spoiled Jewish American princess, she's also the nagging Jewish mother. She tells her boyfriends and friends what to do, and she bosses them around based on what she thinks is best for them. Unfortunately, aside from being kind of a bitch, Rachel doesn't have a lot of character traits. She's beautiful and smart, but pretty socially inept because she does not care what anybody else wants but her, so she feels no need to conform to social convention because it doesn't aid her in getting what she wants. She wants people to like and admire her, but she's not interested in making any changes to her selfish desires in order to make friends. And not wanting to change yourself for other people would be an admirable quality in someone who just didn't suck so much. So basically the entire character is her being an egotist and selfish. And the narrative justifies this because she's just so talented. And I fully will say that Leah Michelle's voice is beautiful, but I don't think she's any more or less talented than any of the other stars of this show. I mean, don't get me wrong, she's very good. Like anyone who can't sing, I very much admire a nice soprano, but it seems like it's a lot of justification for something that does not really matter that much. And there are also never really any consequences for her acting terribly toward anyone else. No lasting consequences anyway that will move her to change her behavior. She's hostile to everyone. It's okay. She succeeds in Glee Club. She gets solos. She's nice to her boyfriend. He likes her and everything's fine. It's fine. And annoyingly, as a character, Rachel was mostly salvageable. She just needed some depth, and they weren't interested in providing that for her because this show wanted to say a lot and ultimately didn't say much of anything. And Glee, despite making Rachel the main character a lot of the time, just wasn't that interested in her. The narrative was invested in showing us how special and talented she was, instead of unraveling why she wants to act this way and why she is this way. Why is Rachel so selfish when she's never wanted for anything? Why is she so mean and thoughtless when she herself is the target of bullying? We get nothing. Most of the other characters, we get a glimpse into why they're the way they are, but for Rachel, it's just because she's a bitch. It's not a mistake she makes, it's just who she is as a person. She does become kinder over the years as people become her friends and demand respect from her, but ultimately the core of her being is just this selfish girl who wants to have what she thinks is owed to her. And the text is telling us that Rachel is just fundamentally kind of a drip, but she still deserves that. I never watched the later seasons because no one did, and they were a mistake. But even in the later seasons, most of the decisions Rachel makes are ego-based. Rachel becomes successful on Broadway, a 1 in a million chance at a very young age, and she completely abandons her dream to go be on TV, maybe. She literally has the role she dreamed of, and she decides the potential for television success is enough to abandon that for. Never mind that the TV show isn't a sure thing, and Broadway was her dream since she was a little kid. It's ego, not ambition. Because ambition can be satisfied, can be achieved. Ambition can drive you to forge new paths and try new things and become a better person, a bigger person. But Rachel is heedless in her choices. She thinks that because she's so talented, she can't fail, and so she takes stupid, unnecessary risks. And they don't pay off. Ultimately, Rachel's fatal flaw is hubris. She thinks she can do better than anybody else, and so she makes choices based on that false assumption. There are a lot of ways that I would have fixed Glee, but this video isn't about that. This is the Rachel problem, TM. So how could she have been fixed? Well, first of all, in my opinion, Rachel should have been new in town. It would give us a great fish out of water narrative for her, which would work really well with the show's plot, which is about outsiders. It also would have justified a lot of her bitchiness as a fear of being left out and being in a new place, being a new girl, and loneliness. I can also tell you from personal experience that even a self-centered, annoying girl like Rachel Berry would have had at least one friend in high school, so that's unrealistic. And if she'd been written as the new kid, she could have lost some of the cattiness and the callowness as she lowered her guard and got to know people, made friends. The other changes I would have made are mostly about Rachel's scene partners. First of all, Quinn, who is kind of the main mean girl initially, she should have been Jewish too. The actress is Jewish, but she doesn't really get cast in Jewish roles because she has that Aryan Barbie look going on, which isn't her fault and she shouldn't be penalized for. Unfortunately, a lot of Jewish actresses don't get to play Jewish characters because they look too white, which is a real oversight and pretty terrible because everyone deserves to see themselves, and there are a lot of Jews who look like that. It's really frustrating that people will continue to put Jews in a box because while I very much conform to the looks-based stereotypes, that doesn't mean we all do. I had many friends growing up who did not look Jewish, but were as Jewish as I am. And it's really bullshit, in my opinion, that actresses like Diana Agron never really get to play Jewish roles because they don't look like what people expect Jews to look like, and no one would buy it. It's bullshit. Quinn is already a foil for Rachel in a lot of ways in the show. While Rachel is prudish and undesirable, Quinn is sexy. Where Rachel is unpleasant and off-putting, Quinn is, at least to most people, sweet and likable. Quinn is a social butterfly, Rachel is a pariah. If Quinn is Jewish, then they actually have something in common. And this could have also made their relationship more three-dimensional and helped them to relate to each other. Quinn's arc is also pretty unfortunate. She becomes pregnant in high school, essentially as a punishment for being a mean girl and a slut. And this makes her a social outcast. This is pretty shitty. I don't think that any young person deserves to get thrown out of their home for having unsafe sex. And the show also frames Quinn's predicament as her learning from her mistakes and becoming a better person and growing because she's an outcast now and has experienced that bullying, which is bullshit because she doesn't get better in later seasons. Seriously, this show was really bad. Why did we watch it? Why did I watch it with my mom? Not the point. Anyway, if Quinn is rewritten to be Jewish, then there's lots of this weird rivalry between them that feels like the Jewish girl trying to steal the white girl's boyfriend. Then it becomes a story not about two girls competing for the same, frankly, mediocre man. It becomes a story about two Jewish girls becoming young women and growing into adulthood together, which is more interesting in my opinion. I would also want the character of Puck to be rewritten as Rachel's main love interest. Puck is a fun character, and he doesn't really conform to ideas about Jewish masculinity, probably because the actor playing Puck was not Jewish. There's a long, proud tradition in Hollywood of Jewish characters being allowed to be well-rounded as long as they're not played by Jews. Puck and Rachel do date for an episode, but it's not because he's actually interested in her. He still wants to be with Quinn at that point. He dates Rachel because his mother wishes that he would go out with a nice Jewish girl, and okay, Rachel is two of those things. I don't like this, and it pissed me off when I saw it, because Jews wanting to date each other independent of their Jewishness should be on TV. If he wants to date Rachel, it could be for any number of reasons. She's snarky and clever and talented, and they have that in common. She's also a lot like Quinn, that she's mean and petty, so he could like her for those reasons. Just dating Rachel because she's also Jewish isn't exactly flattering. I think it would be more interesting if Rachel initially pursues Finn because she thinks he's superficially what she wants, handsome and popular. But then when she gets to know him and actually gets into a relationship with him, she finds they have very little in common, and Ultimately, she's looking for someone who's more like her. Then maybe she and Puck have an enemies to lovers thing going on, and it turns out he really likes musicals and admires Rachel's ambition and her talent, and she really admires his musical accomplishment and how, he's kind of smarter than he lets on. I could see it. On another note, I also think it's bullshit that Rachel isn't sympathetic to the prejudice that a lot of the other kids in Glee Club experience. She's Jewish in rural Ohio. It's not exactly a hotbed of Jewish culture. There are Jews in the Midwest, but it's not known for being like the most fun, safe place to be a minority. Even if she'd never experienced anti-Semitism, one of her dads probably had. And growing up, she almost definitely experienced people being prejudiced against her parents for being a gay couple. Rachel really has no sympathy for anyone and uses her position of leadership in the Glee Club to prevent other equally talented classmates from getting opportunities. Particularly Mercedes Jones, who is so underused and mistreated by the writers. If this were a 6-hour Glee retrospective, like half of it would be the character assassination of Mercedes Jones, who really deserved a better show than she got. The writers didn't shy away from showing homophobia on screen or really just writing racist jokes to be edgy, so why didn't they depict anti-Semitism at all? Well, because it's too heavy. Ironic racism is funnier, I guess, and that'd be too much Jewish content for primetime. I do have this theory that most shows with a Jewish premise exempted, have what I call the Rosenberg quotient. Basically, you can only bring up Judaism, Jews, or Jewish stuff so often or you risk alienating your mainstream audience. This comes from the 1990s show Buffy, Vampire Slayer, a show with several Jewish stars and writers, and less than 10 references to Judaism. And one canonically Jewish main character. The Rosenberg quotient actually answers a lot of questions, like how on Friends, Ross and Monica Geller are siblings, but he's Jewish in the show and she's really not. Rachel Green is also coded as a Jewish character, but is never explicitly stated to be. That aside, the Rosenberg quotient dictates that Judaism can be brought up for flavor, to provide a little ethnic je ne sais quoi, but not really as part of a character's real life or lived experiences. No characterization here. You can identify the Rosenberg quotient in action if a character's Jewishness is only referenced when major holidays come up, like, for example, House wishing Wilson a happy Hanukkah. Rachel Berry isn't exactly a victim of the Rosenberg quotient. If anything, her being less obviously Jewish would have been better, because her Jewishness is inauthentic and unnuanced. I do have a more personal reason for not being a fan of Rachel Berry, and it's time to get out your tiniest violin. Though I don't think I look like her or have anything in common with her, I was teased for being like Rachel Berry. I guess this is the cultural touchstone that millennials had for annoying Jewish teenagers. Give me Ross Geller any day. I'll be that whiny bastard over this bitch. Yeah, I was an annoying, entitled, and probably pretty rude teenager and young adult. And probably now. Pretty much every previous version of myself, really. If you are watching this and you knew me like any time before 2016, I am sorry. Please forget me. I am so embarrassed, truly. I want to die every time I think about it. I want the neuralizer thing from Men in Black to just make everyone who knew me back then forget that I existed. Is that too much to ask? That being said, even though I was very much the worst, I still don't think I deserve to be made fun of like that. And don't get me wrong, that wasn't even in like the top tier of the bullying I experienced. It doesn't even make the highlight reel. But it was bad. I don't think it's a good sign for the culture that people bullied me, and this did happen multiple times, by the way, for being annoying like Rachel Berry. What does that say about the portrayal of her character and Jews in media? Nothing good. Of course, media is highly subjective. I could say it's offensive and someone else might find it funny. There are actually a number of perspectives on Judaism in Glee in the description that I've linked. My main problem with it is, especially 10 years ago when Glee was on the air, Jewish representation is so often shit. We do have a lot better now, but as with most minorities, we were done dirty for a very long time. A lot of people, even people who claim to be up on social justice, will claim that Jews do better in the media because there are more Jews in the entertainment industry. My rebuttal to that is just simply untrue. It also doesn't matter even if there are more Jews in the entertainment industry, because most Jewish creators have come out to say that they've experienced prejudice because of that. They've been told their projects are too Jewish or to just remove the Judaism entirely. The Nanny was one of the biggest sitcoms in the 90s, and it's actually had a second life streaming on HBO. But Fran Drescher was initially told to rewrite the character as Italian and completely erase her Jewish heritage. She refused to budge on that, and now we very luckily have Fran Fine. My point is that Jewish representation is still pretty mixed, and we need to be aware of how that affects the viewing audience, particularly Jewish kids. I was really lucky. I grew up in a robust Jewish community with a lot of role models I could look up to and emulate. As a kid, I knew tons of amazing Jewish people in real life. But a lot of kids out there might be the only Jewish kid in their class, from the only Jewish family in their town. We have to do better for them. We have to hold media accountable to do better for them. And also importantly, we have to think about the towns that have no Jewish residents, because there are a lot of those too. Jews are a vanishingly small percentage of the population, to the point that there are more than 5 times the amount of natural redheads as there are Jewish people. Well, I do want to thank you for tuning into the first installment of this series, which will probably be a bit of a bummer. Although if there is a show that you'd like to see us analyze, please leave a comment. I always love to hear from you. Thank you for watching. Happy last day of Jewish American Heritage Month. And I hope it was okay. I mean, it's hard to say that, like, I hope things are going well because it's such a mess out there right now. But I guess I hope that you find some solace in some media that you enjoy. Go watch a good Jewish TV show. There are some. They're out there. And I hope to cover some of them soon. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Bye!